Good afternoon and welcome back to the post-lunch session on National Logistics Policy towards Seamless Movement of Goods. To take us through this session, we have an eminent panel of speakers to include Mr. S. Krishnan, IAS Additional Chief Secretary to Government Industries Department, Government of Tamil Nadu. Mr. N. Shivashailam, IAS Retired Administrative Member, Karnataka State Administrative Tribunal. Mr. Manoj Singh, Executive Director, Traffic Transportation, Railway Board Member. Mr. Abhishek Gupta, Honorary Joint Secretary, All India Transporters Welfare Association. The session would be comprised of two parts. The first would be a presentation by Mr. Krishnan, followed by a panel discussion to be moderated by Mr. Xerxes Master, President, Association of Multimodal Transport Operators of India. The session convener would be Mr. Shantanu Badkamkar, who is past president MTOI. I would like to begin with introducing Mr. Krishnan. Mr. Krishnan, Additional Chief Secretary Industries for Government of Tamil Nadu, has a service record of more than 30 years. He holds many accomplishments such as serving as the Senior Advisor in the Office of the Executive Director of India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Bhutan in the International Monetary Fund, Washington, representing the Government of India in the G20 expert groups on international financial architecture and global financial safety nets. And he has also assisted in preparing the union budget as well as the Tamil Nadu state budget during multiple years. He's also been the Principal Secretary to the Government of Tamil Nadu in the Housing and Urban Development and Planning, Development and Special Initiatives Departments. He was the founder CEO of the Tamil Nadu Infrastructure Development Board. Through his multiple roles as public administrator, Mr. Krishnan has demonstrated expertise in aspects of policy making, public finance, and socio-economic development issues. He holds a Bachelor of Arts honors from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, and a Master of Arts in Economics from Annamalai University. I would like to hand over the session to Mr. Shantanu Badkamkar to welcome Mr. Krishnan.
Welcome, Mr. Krishnan. Nice to connect with you, and welcome all other fellow panelists. Many of us in logistics sector believe that national logistics policy will be a game changer. It won't be a game changer just for the logistics sector, but even more for the manufacturing, agricultural and mining sectors. Because the trade facilitation, the key is logistics, and we have our next speaker present the state perspective as well as the national perspective for seamless movement of goods. Mr. Krishnan, the floor is yours. Please present your perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on this very eminent panel, and also to invite me for this important national level, almost international level conference. When the invitation reached me, I think the important point that was made was that generally the perspective of states and state governments is not heard in many of these events. And as a result, and especially in the logistics area and in the area of even shipping and maritime industry, states do play an important role, and it's important to hear the state's perspective. So from that perspective, I'm really grateful that I have been given this slot and an exclusive speaking slot ahead of an extremely capable and eminent panel, which is to discuss the issues surrounding this. Given the eminence of the panel and given the important people whose views are also very relevant, I will keep my presentation very brief and run through some of the slides quickly, just to set the perspective and also to detail some of the things that state governments are doing, and specifically the government of Tamil Nadu is doing. Next. You see, already the importance of logistics is something that all of us are aware of, which is why we are discussing this issue today. And it is becoming significantly more important because
the slide is not moving.
Mr. Krishnan, slides are not moving forward.
Oh, okay. Is that?
Yes, that's right. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So we are aware of the importance of the industry. We are aware of how much it contributes to overall costs and how it can bring down costs both within the manufacturing chain and also in making sure that goods reach people much more seamlessly. And many investments in India ultimately happen on the basis of the size of the Indian domestic market. And therefore, the logistics backbone of the Indian domestic market is also extremely important. And we also need to realize that ultimately, much as we may look for employment and much as we may look for, a greater share in exports and greater share in various other parts of global trade, ultimately we are doing all this oriented towards welfare of the people of the country. And ultimately, the consumption levels, the ability of Indian customers to get cheaper goods of higher quality, the ability for them to be able to be consumers of better quality services is as important as our ability to be participants in the global economy. So I think both in terms of consumers and in terms of our ability to produce for the market, logistics becomes absolutely critical. Next. We have shown a significant improvement, but there again, there has been a slight backslide, and currently we are rated 44th overall. And the intent really ends up being how do we improve our overall ranking. Next. Of course, the government of India has a number of initiatives, including the dedicated freight corridor, Sagarmala, Bharatmala, many of the large road projects. Which is extremely useful and connects across the country. But equally, it's important that the last mile connectivity ends up with various states. And this is where the coordination between the interagency coordination within the government of India, and from my experience of working in the government of India and also my experience of dealing with the government of India now from a state government perspective, what you find is sometimes the state government finds it easier to deal with an individual ministry of the government of India than ministries in the government of India themselves. So what happens is there is a massive exercise of coordination which is required. And I think that is where the national logistics policy and the recently announced initiative of the Prime Minister, the Gati Shakti program, assume much greater importance. The seamlessness becomes important there. So whether you're looking at a port, as I sit here in my office in Chennai, I actually overlook the dockyards of Madras Port Trust of the Chennai port. And whether you look at, the integration which takes place in the port between the various kinds of multimodal movement that we are talking about, whether we're looking at, whether the road connectivity to the ports is good, which is a challenge we face in a place like Chennai right now, whether we look at a range of other connectivity elements that we are concerned with, whether we are looking at warehousing, adequate warehousing being available and quality warehousing being available for storage, all of these become very, very critical. And as far as India is concerned, the seamless movement, even of containerized traffic, the so-called roll-on, roll-off kind of mechanism is still a challenge. And added to all this is, of course, trade facilitation through the customs department. So all of this becomes important. One big change, and which many people highlight very frequently, is what GST has done. In fact, anecdotally, many people have shared with me from industry that thanks to GST and the removal of a number of checkposts at various locations, the speed of movement of vehicles across states has significantly picked up, and goods are able to be transported much more quickly among states, which is a very, very good thing. Not so good thing for commercial goods transport manufacturers, who also come and tell me that the demand for buses, for trucks has gone down simply because the fleet utilization has improved considerably. But overall, I guess that will settle, but that's a good problem to have as opposed to considerable delays. And currently, it is estimated that our logistics costs range between 13 to 14% of GDP, and we should target to bring it down to about 8% by 2025. So huge opportunities for enhanced efficiency there. These are more general points. All of us are well aware, so I think we should hear more detailed questions from the panel on this aspect. The next slide really reflects on just going back to the previous slide, I think one aspect I just want to emphasize is the mechanisms that we create for coordination is very, very important, because there are roadways, the National Highways Authority, state-run roads, there are railways and their connectivity issues, and of course now waterways are significantly important. Coastal shipping in a country like India has not been exploited to the extent to which it needs to be. Because, just to give you an example of where multimodal integration becomes important, I run a paper company which actually gets coal from multiple sources, and although there is Karaikal port is closer to where the company operates by almost 200-300 kilometers, it's cheaper for us to import from Tuticorin port simply because multimodal connectivity is better. So that is how important or how significant costs become. There are many cases where ports in Tamil Nadu, whether it is Chennai, Kattupalli or Ennore, become significantly cheaper than other ports, even if you have to transport from, say, a neighboring state like Karnataka. So all of these issues become important, and that is something which is significant. I just want to highlight this. The other element, of course, is that the freight policy of the railways and their ability to make wagons available. Very frequently, when we look at coal transportation, this becomes critical across the state, across the country, and has significant impact on costs. Next. So what states can do to actually improve this is very important, and I think the coordination mechanisms is what we need to look at. One of the coordination mechanisms where it becomes significantly easier is through use of digital means, and that is something which can IT packages and IT mechanisms can significantly improve this, and I think a lot of it is already happening. For instance, the FASTag mechanism which they use for movement across the toll gates, I think has been a significant success as it reduces waiting times significantly. Similarly, IT applications on GST also reduce the need for checkposts, and that is something that we can do away with over time. As far as Tamil Nadu is concerned, what we have done is we have set up a nodal agency for logistics, which is a state industrial development corporation. We have already signed an MOU to establish a multimodal logistics park at one location, but we are open to opening more. We are collaborating with the railways, with the national highways, and also with the ports. So all of those are aspects which become important. The state logistics, integrated logistics plan is currently under preparation and should be released in the next 3 to 4 months. I understand some states have gone a little further ahead on this, but we are looking to learn from a number of other states and have a comprehensive approach there. And of course, we have a single window mechanism which clears out a lot of that. And one, that the efficacy of Tamil Nadu's existing infrastructure on logistics and also the speed of clearances has basically resulted in a large number of warehouses coming up in the state. We have a very, very extensive network of warehouses. We have the largest number of warehouses in the country which are registered with the Warehousing Development and Regulatory Organization. So that again helps seamless trading based on warehouse receipts and so on, which again helps in greater liquidity, and that also is a financial tool which can very frequently be used, bringing down costs. Next. We are also significant parts of the various industrial corridors coming up in the state. The Chennai-Bengaluru Industrial Corridor, the East Coast Corridor in India, of which the Chennai-Kanyakumari Industrial Corridor is one leg, and the Visakhapatnam to Chennai Industrial Corridor is something which is again coming up. In addition, the Bengaluru-Kochi Corridor will also cut through Tamil Nadu in significant chunks. So that is an important element where a number of investments are being made on infrastructure related to industrial development and other forms of development. And like I already pointed out, some of the significant measures which we have taken here, and we are looking to see whether with the railways we can work for seamless transfer and movement. There are clearly issues here. There are clearly issues on investment which needs to be made on the linkages to multimodal parks or linkages to new nodes which are created with industrial infrastructure. Some clarity as to who invests in the trunk infrastructure which connects would really help. When you actually impose the costs of the trunk infrastructure on the node, then what happens is the industries or warehouses which get established there need to meet a significantly higher cost. If the cost of such trunk infrastructure can be linked up with the concerned departments, whether it is railways, or whether it is national highways, or even in certain cases, state government departments, state government highways, etc., then it certainly helps in bringing down the costs for the logistics nodes and for the industrial infrastructure nodes. This is something that we've also raised with the Government of India. And at least in the state side, we are making sure that the state's budget for highways, the state's budget for waterways, etc., meets the cost of this added infrastructure. And we've also decided of late to meet some of the electricity linked costs of such infrastructure also the state government meets out of its budget. So those are mechanisms which we've already taken. Similar to this, certain other connectivity projects have been prioritized, and we are looking at what can be done with deeper draft ports, large number of jetties along the coast which can help with transportation of specific commodities, coal, natural gas, and a number of those mechanisms have also been done. And the coordination aspect is something that we are working on very seriously, and that becomes very important. But we've found very, very encouraging response from central government agencies. And that is why I remarked earlier that it is sometimes easier for a state government to actually interact with different agencies and Government of India and get them onto the same table, as opposed to them interacting at Delhi and trying to come on to the same page. That has been our experience so far. Next, please. So these are some of in the Leeds report, which was generated by the Government of India. They had actually pointed out some of the shortcomings in and issues relating to infrastructure in Tamil Nadu, especially related to logistics. All of these have been are being addressed, whether it is restrictions within the city for both the Chennai port, seaport, and the Chennai airport. Then there are issues relating to trucks not being given importance in industrial areas, which I think we woke up to a little late. I mean, oftentimes you don't expect that truck detention times will be so long, but now we provide for adequate truck parking at all of these locations. We are also looking at, as I told you, the last mile connectivity, which is almost entirely in the hands of state governments, and which is something that necessary investment needs to be made. Rail connectivity, there are mechanisms through which we need to look at. And the rail freight, and clearly this is an area where we need to work with the railway ministry. Their rate structures and a number of other issues are an area of concern. But if we are able to work with the ministry, then I think we would be able to use the rail infrastructure far more significantly. And of course, like I mentioned, if we are able to merge or look at coastal shipping alongside using the rail infrastructure more effectively, then costs can be.
Mr. Krishnan, let me just tell you, the slides have not moved. Maybe the person coordinating with you should move the slides.
We'll try again. In fact, yeah. Let me just check whether.
And how much more time we will need?
That is it. I'm done. That was my last slide.
Yeah.
So now
the slides have not moved. Yeah.
I'm just putting it onto the last slide. You can see it now.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
It, of course, is human resources. And what we find very interestingly is that a lot of private companies also in Tamil Nadu have taken up logistics as an important line of business. One of the traditional industrial houses of Tamil Nadu, TVS, is into logistics in a big way now. They've also traditionally been in logistics earlier. A number of opportunities for jobs in that area, and therefore we've also set up an Apex Skill Center on the logistics side, which will actually train a large number of human resources for this sector. So let me stop here saying that for the state government, logistics is becoming a significantly more important element. We recognize the challenges of coordination, and we understand that we need to work very effectively with the central government and with other states to enable this to happen seamlessly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krishnan. It was an outstanding presentation. You touched my heart because of focus on seamless multimodal, because seamlessness is a concept which AMTOI has brought. You will not find it anywhere in the world. It's purely our contribution as a, we say, Vishwaguru, means we are not copying anyone. And we have great inspiration from Mr. Sivasailam for it. And please share your presentation. Equally, yesterday I had session with Ministry of Highways, and I will share what we have done on seamlessness. I'll get your contact details from Informa or Dr. Malini Shankar. I would like to add that this was a very content-intensive presentation, so we will ask our southern region to get in touch with you. We have been interacting as AMTOI with state government, and some of the most interesting interactions we had were with West Bengal and Maharashtra government. In South, we have been a bit slow, but we will get in touch with you because all these things need to be built up. Thanks again. We have many senior panelists and my colleague, the current president of AMTOI, eager to moderate the session. I would request everyone to keep their questions ready, and floor is with you, Xerxes.
Xerxes, before you come in, just to add that in the Tamil Nadu Apex Skill Development Council for Logistics, AMTOI is a partner in that. So you may want to cover that.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
So partner means we are shareholder and director both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek, for bringing that to our attention. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session for the National Logistics Policy towards Seamless Movement of Goods. We have an extremely erudite panel with us. Thank you, Mr. Krishnan, for this very enlightening presentation. We much appreciate it. We have already dwelt and everyone knows what the NLP is, but just a little tidbit to share before we begin the official session. According to LEADS, which is the acronym for Logistics Ease across different states, survey of 2021 commissioned by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, India's logistics cost accounts for around 14% of the GDP as mentioned earlier today, significantly higher than the 8 to 10% range for developing economies across the world. The NLP formulated by the government and industry ministry will improve India's trade competitiveness, create jobs, improve India's logistics performance in global rankings, and pave the way for India to become a logistics hub. The essence of the NLP is to bring all stakeholders under one umbrella using technology. The logistics industry will be a key enabler of India's journey to become a $5 trillion economy, which is the vision of our Honorable Prime Minister. But before that, it needs a massive, massive cost correction. And we are here to discuss that to a certain extent today. Before I begin, I would request all the panelists to just give a brief introduction in 1 or 2 lines, starting with you, Mr. Krishnan. I've already been introduced, but if you could just once again enlighten the audience. Mr. Krishnan?
Yes, please.
Yeah, if you could just give a 1 or 2 line introduction. Already you have been, but
yeah, I thought I was already introduced.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm currently posted as Additional Chief Secretary of the Industries Department. I earlier served in the Finance Department and Housing and Planning and Development Departments in Tamil Nadu. I've also worked with the Government of India and with I spent a brief stint at the IMF. So it is a fairly typical, career plan for a civil servant, and that's about the only job I've done, but across a range of sectors and with a range of experiences.
Thank you, sir. Welcome to the panel. Mr. Manoj Singh, sir, would you be kind enough to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon to all. First of all, many thanks for having me on this very important discussion. I'm Manoj Singh. I'm presently Executive Director in the Ministry of Railways, or the Railway Board. I was I think referred to as a member, but let me clarify that I am not one of the members of the railway board. Members of the railway board and the chairman, they constitute the railway board. There are just 4 or 5 of them. But I work as the executive director. I work at the operational level. I am part of the freight team right now. I look after the freight operations. There is a team of officers with me who look after the national freight running of freight trains on a day-to-day basis. So, and I've been in this sector with the railways, as well as I've had a chance to work in the Planning Commission and Niti Aayog as advisor transport.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome to the panel. Our next panelist needs no introduction. He's an old friend of ours at Mr. Sivaselam. Protocol demands that I ask you to say a few words again. Sorry, you'll have to unmute, please.
Thank you for the introduction, but I can only tell you that I am the product of the environment where I work. So, I mean, it's been a great journey, starting as being the first Secretary of Logistics in Government of India. I think after that they have discontinued with this, but I'm sure that they are working on it to get it back with greater vigor. I traverse a whole area of interests, which includes the metro rail, which includes telecom, of which I was the author for the 5G policy of India. And I find a lot of synergies between two wonderful areas, telecom and logistics, which form the bulk of the Indian startups. So I'm when I'm not writing orders, I'm busy with both these, and let me tell you, I'm more busy than I was while at service. Thank you.
Thank you. Abhishek, you're an old school friend of mine, but please go ahead and give your introduction as well to everyone.
Thanks, Justice. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Abhishek Gupta, and I'm the Joint Secretary at the All India Transport Welfare Association. Glad to be a part of this panel, which is actually a lot of our colleagues with who we work together on various occasions, and looking forward to have a healthy discussion. Thank you.
Welcome, Abhishek. Vivek, would you please give your introduction as well?
Yeah, so I'm the current owner, managing director of Team Global Logistics. We specialize in collision control load shipments on a national level, and of course, former president of AMTOY and former also president of Federation of Indian Logistics Association, and been speaker at various seminars as government as well as at private organized seminars. Yeah, that's a small introduction.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get straight into it. I believe Mr. Singh has an urgent board meeting and would be like to leave the panel a little early. So, sir, I'll direct my first question to you, if you don't mind. India currently needs to develop a modern, agile, rolling and floating stock for an effective hinterland movement, which is a bone of contention still for many. Can you please elaborate on the railway's vision and idea for ensuring the same, how it is going about this? Sir, you will have to unmute. I think you're muted, sir.
Yeah, right. So I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir. Now you are.
Railways. The defining thing about railways, in my view, is that we have a great reach. So we can reach from anywhere to anywhere in the country. So whether it's passenger movement or it's freight movement, our penetration is pretty, let's say, intensive. Having said that, I have to confess that still there are a few districts in this country which are still not served by the rail network. That's more a function of the geography. These are very difficult terrains, and also historically those areas have been still not been fed by the railways. But we are taking steps so that, for example, in the northeast part of the country, even the capital cities of the northeastern states are not yet, all of them are not on the rail map. We are trying to put them on the rail map, let's say by 2023, 24, like that. And some other districts also in difficult terrains will be brought on to there. So nearly 68,000 route kilometers is the kind of the network that we've got. So obviously it's got a great reach. And when we have the reach, the advantage is that we are able to move the goods from anywhere in the country to anywhere else in the country. And one good example of that I find in recent times is the movement of fertilizer. So this year, there has been, you would have seen in the press, there has been certain difficulties in fertilizer movement, basically because the cost of the imported fertilizer was very high, and therefore at the ports we had. But then when we started moving this, we have been able to a large extent, supply fertilizer. And fertilizer in India goes from the domestic manufacturers as well as the ports in the various eastern ports, western ports, to nearly 1,000 district points, the rake points, what we call as the rake points. So that's the kind of the hinterland reach that we've got, and that is further getting improved by the network capacity. One of the biggest things that we find today is, and before the fertilizer, we had the power issue also. There was a problem with the coal movement, but that also now the coal has been supplied to most of the plants in the country, and now roughly 12 days coal is available at the power plants, which had gone down to nearly 3-4 days, and in some plants less than nearly 1 day or something like that. But that was also pulled up, and we have been able to supply now nearly comfortable levels at most of the power plants. Food grain, another movement, and which really is very important because of largely we are an agricultural economy still, and the strength in the agriculture. When you see it from the logistics point of view, when you see that how strong our sector, agriculture sector is, and if we can really give a boost to logistics of the agri products, what wonder it can do. So therefore, the farmer special, the Kisan special, the other FCI movement, and even, for example, Mr. Krishnan is here. We are in touch with the Tamil Nadu State Civil Supplies. They have asked us to move their food grains inside Tamil Nadu in the next 12 days or so before 31st January. We are moving that. So all that is done on a day-to-day basis. Now, the two constraints that we feel there are today in the railways, first is the capacity issue, which is the question that you raised, which we are trying to address. Hugely capital intensive, dedicated freight corridors, etc., multiple tracking, the doubling, tripling, and fourth line also in some sectors we are doing. Second thing today that we find today is that we find that demand is outstripping the supply in railways. We are probably not able to meet supply side fully, especially in the cement sector, for example. There are shortages here and there, so we find that this year we will end with something like 1.3 billion or nearly 1,300 to 1,400 million tons of traffic that we would have moved, which is last year was around 1.2 billion. So progressively we are trying to move towards 2 billion mark, 2,000 million tons of freight traffic in the next 3-4 years, sorry, for which again the capacity would be the real issue. And we are also ramping up the acquisition of wagons, etc. So this is what we are doing.
Commendable job, sir. I think, of course, we have to keep up with our Northeast neighbors. They have made rapid strides in railways, but I'm sure we are on the right track. Thank you very much for these details. My next question is tailor-made for my next panelist, Mr. Sivasailam. The NLP has provided for a national logistics portal, which consists of the port community system, process re-engineering, and large-scale digitization. How do you see this concept evolving into an effective ecosystem for our national logistics policy?
Xerxes, Vivek, and Shantanuji know my interest in this subject, and I feel and how important it is, because if we don't I will just put the alarm bells first, because if we don't address this issue, which is cross-cutting for the requirement of multimodality, any amount of infrastructure development on a multimodal basis cannot happen. This is the first prerequisite for the happening of multimodality. Because unless the issues of documentation comes, the issues of authenticity comes, the issues of reliability comes, the issue of multiple stakeholders working cooperatively comes. Otherwise, cooperative working is done by physical aspect. It is this digitization, and not just digitization. The word digitization is more than 20 years old. The important thing is platform. And now, fortunately for logistics, we are not even at platforms. We are on platform of platforms. Because every logistics, that is the only way by which we can take advantage of the huge specialities which logistics trade has. For example, air cargo movement is not like rail cargo. They have got to be different. You cannot say integrate rail cargo and air cargo and shipping. That's not possible. They will always be different, but they can always work on the same platform and integrate, the word used, seamlessly. I mean, unless and until we address that, it is this digitization concept and its subsequent development in technology, which is called platforms, which is at the base. Now, the alarm is very simple. If we as a group are not able to trust each other and work on the platforms, believe me, we will be working on foreign platforms in less than 3 years from today. You will have no other choice. If you want to do an export, you jolly well join one of the foreign platforms. Otherwise, you would have no access. Now, the point for India is that with its huge capability of its business and also technologies, I have no harms in telling that both Vivek and Zexis have developed state-of-the-art things. And that must be shared with the industry. And people must be allowed to get into it. TCS has also done it. Now, if you tell me that there should be one guy to do everything, it's physically not possible. It's like telling that this whole country should be run on something called India platform. That's not possible. There is so much of expertise which is required, so much of integration which is required, that each one forms a platform on its own, and each one forms an ecosystem of its own. It's a combination of ecosystems which come together. And it is only experts in that particular business who can develop those ecosystems. But the important thing is allow other people who can integrate to freely get into these systems, so that seamless integration would be possible. I would hasten to add, we need to do this. We have already lost, trust me, we have already lost more than a year's time. And our growth in this is minuscule. Whereas internationally, if you look at something like the Myers platform, which was at its fledgling in early 2020, is today a well-grown system. And they are integrating countries, and internationally they are integrated. They are bringing this as an agenda. If you talk to EU, they will always put this as an agenda. In the EU discussions, it is an agenda. Either India takes it or leaves it. So that is the level at which we are going. We need to offer the world an agenda, something which Singapore has already asked. Singapore has already asked, but we have not reciprocated. Now, we need to get into those agendas in order to prevent us from being at the backdrop, at the beck and call of some other platforms, which we ourselves could have done it on our own, and not just for ourselves. And we will share it with the world. Today, everybody knows that India shares with the world and does not impose costs for those sharing. And we need to leverage this wonderful understanding of the Indian concept and bring it. Our platforms should serve the world. Okay. Not to ensure that we are going to overcharge people, but we are willing, because since our trade will be the volumes will be so high, that we are in a position to provide the least cost solutions to least cost and most reliable solutions and safe solutions to this. I think I'll end at that, except to say that we are losing time, and I'm honestly losing patience as well, because next year, 2 years down the line, it will be an opportunity lost, and there's no harm, no point crying over spilled milk.
Absolutely right, sir. We need to step on the gas here. I agree with you there. My next question is again to Mr. Singh. So the NLP also provides for granting infrastructure status to the logistics industry. And we hope that will come very soon. What other factors can you quickly suggest to improve India's logistics performance index? Anything else on your mind which can be done?
Yeah, so, some of the steps we actually are taking in the railways, and some of the key terms which I would like to mention here is this, for example, digitization. So, today, for example, it's possible to work with the railways entirely on what we call as the ERD, that is electronic documentation, and the whole process of ETRR, which is electronic railway receipt. So 95% or 98% of our now the railway receipts which are getting generated are electronic. And somebody just, he can register demand electronically. He can do all the payments through e-payment. And so essentially, I think most important, obviously, you have to come to the siding or to the goods shed to physically load. Obviously, that is required. But otherwise, the processes that we want to convert that into digital, that a huge move is there already. And you probably are aware that we have our internal freight operation information system, the FOIS. We have CRIS, the Center for Railway Information System, which has done yeoman's work both in the passenger side, all the electronic ticketing, etc., IRCTC's website and all that. So I think what Mr. Siv Sailam was mentioning about, the important thing is, yes, that, yeah, railways, maybe we would be working all within our domain, but how do we transfer? How is the seamlessness? I mean, that's the crux. How can we move across the modes, the intermodality, multimodality, seamlessness? This, I think now we all have to work together. And how do we transfer across the modes? The seams have to be really worked in a manner so that the logistics cost about which you mentioned, overall we can bring that down, and the inventory carrying cost, etc. And to that sense, the reliability in our operations, we are constantly trying to see that how reliable railways can become. Can we give transit time assurances? So you'll be very happy to know that in container movement, we have given for the first time transit assurance. So this was launched on the 15th of August in last year, 21. Where for the North India cargo going to Western ports, we have not yet given this, for example, in Tamil Nadu, but definitely to the major part of the hinterland, the export hinterland and import, that we have now said that and we given hours, say, for example, from North India, Delhi to Mundra or to JNPT, we say that, in 55 hours, we will carry your exports. So that can, and we are monitoring, we have moved something like 2,200 trains. The first time in the history of railways, this has been given. So things like this, that is within the domain, but also across the domains. That's where the focus needs to be there.
Thank you, sir. That's well noted on that. My next question is to Vivek. So Vivek, our hinterland connectivity has made rapid progress in the last decade, but there is still a lot to be done. As I said earlier, NLP has made provisions for rapid and vast development of multimodal logistic hubs and parks. Warehousing is the next big thing, or is already here, according to the trade pundits. What is required to ensure a seamless movement of goods in a cost-effective manner to be developed simultaneously? Because we are seeing one spoke is being developed, the other is still lagging far behind, as all spokes have to move together in harmony for it to be an effective, seamless movement. How can the NLP help to coordinate this fragmented industry in a seamless manner? What can you say on that?
Yeah, so there are, I think one of the, if you're talking about hinterland connectivity, and hinterland connectivity is incomplete when you speak it independent of multimodal transportation. So hinterland connectivity comes when you are connecting maybe a road node to a rail node to the seed node. So there are multiple nodes which are coming in, and that's why government is looking at, say, MMLP, the multimodal logistics paths which are being developed. But MMLP is state has their own way, as some of the states have announced MMLP policies, the center has their own MMLP. But whereas what we have ignored is on the EXIM side, there have already been huge amount of investments in terms of creation of inland container depots. Traditionally, the railways, we have Mr. Singh here, and traditionally we have the railway goods sheds which are available in abundance, all over the country. Now, can we really, convert these existing infrastructure into MMLPs? I think that is one area, and that's a low-hanging fruit is what we should look at. And to the NLP, that is one area that has to be addressed. So that existing infrastructure gets used, because I think we see news about tenders being floated about MMLP, and okay, there are certain areas in which this kind of infrastructure does not exist. Yes, I mean, if it is the inland water, IWT, there's a MMLP being constructed at Varanasi. Yes, that is very much required. But in NCR itself, there are close to 9 inland container depots. Now, not all of them are being used to its best potential. Can we all convert them to MMLP through a policy? There are certain good sheds which are being underutilized. Can we upgrade them to handle, through private, public-private partnership, or through introduction of modern handling equipments, making them container-enabled? Because most of the good sheds are currently equipped to handle the wagons, which are the traditional mode of rail transport. But so, not all of them can handle containerized transportation of goods, because of they were not designed that way. But can we upgrade them? So I think these are some of the things that can be done immediately through policy, which will really help us achieve a better inland connectivity and bring down the cost of the transportation. That would be my 2 bit. I think Mr. Shivasalam wants to add a point.
Sir, you want to chip in? Thank you, Vivek. Very, very valid points on this, on using the existing infrastructure. Please, sir, go ahead, sir. Mr. Shivasalam, you have raised your hand. Sir, would you like to go ahead? I don't think you can hear us. Mr. Shivasalam, can you hear me?
We'll come back.
Yeah, we'll come back to you. So, sir, my next question is, Abhishek, to you. The NLP also emphasizes on a national, and since you are in a very labor-intensive business or a human resource business side of the business, the NLP also emphasizes on a national logistics workforce strategy for providing integrated skill development of logistics sector professionals. Will the introduction of a certified logistics professional become a reality, and will it be effective? What other measures can we take?
So, just like you mentioned, that we are in a labor-intensive space, especially being from the trucking side. Majority of the labor that we see are the truck drivers, and I'm not sure how much of a certified driver requirement is today. Definitely, there's a requirement for drivers. If we are able to get certified drivers, those who are willing to work in the current conditions, it would be great, and it would definitely help. But I think along with the certification, there is a need for improving the standard of where the working conditions of these drivers. I think, like Mr. Krishnan rightly pointed out in his presentation, that Tamil Nadu has taken initiatives for parking and other things. I think similarly, other states need to ramp up that infrastructure, not just for parking, but even for highway facilities, basic things like sanitation on the highways. Also, the loading and unloading points where these vehicles go, be it ports, be it factories, be it warehouses, there's very little infrastructure for them. So they're expected to keep the security of the material and the truck, as well as live in those working conditions. So definitely it would make a difference, provided that the other things around it are also taken care of. And if the states are moving in that direction, I'm sure we're on the right track.
Thank you, Abhishek. Sir, my next question is to Mr. Krishnan, sir. Water transport for
Justice Mr. Sivasailam had raised
Sorry,
hands.
yeah. Should I finish this question and then come back to him? Would that be okay? Thank you, sir. Thank you. So the water transport for goods and passengers is very much in its infancy stage in India compared to the Western world, despite us having a 7,500 kilometer coastline, one of the largest river networks in the world. What is the reason for this, and how can we, sir, make up for lost time in this segment?
I think the reason for this, I think, again, is actually the linkages. When the truck sector tends to transport a lot more simply because it's much more convenient for transportation within the country. From one location to the next, it's virtually a door-to-door service. Although the costs may be higher, the risks may be higher, accidents, road traffic, everything else. It may be much cheaper if you had a much better seamless integration in terms of transfer from one mode to the other. Then maybe if you went in by water transport, by ship, or even an inland waterway, it can make a significantly higher difference. It's also possibly environmentally much more friendly. I think you would be able to actually, at much lower consumption of fuel, you would be able to move goods around where the urgency is not so much. But I think the multimodality, the absence of multimodality, and thereby the much reduced convenience is the main reason why that really doesn't happen as much as it ought to. That is something, and the point was already made about containers and containers moving off ships onto trucks or onto trains and then equally seamlessly moving from one place to another. If that happens, then certainly I think you will see a lot more waterborne transportation. The second element, of course, is the maintenance of waterways itself. Coastal shipping, of course, is one part. I think that's not so much an issue, but inland waterways, there's a lot more which needs to be done for maintenance, particularly in the southern side. We have, for instance, between Andhra and Tamil Nadu, the old Buckingham Canal, which was a major transportation route maybe a century ago, but very poorly maintained now, but something which can certainly be revived.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sivasailam, you wanted to add?
I wanted to add, and thank you for this opportunity, which came after Mr. Krishnan also. So I'll also try to answer some of those issues which was raised there. The first thing is, what is the single big thing which you need to do for interface connectivity, for multimodality? My point to each of the four big boys, which is the railways, the ports, and the airports, and the truck terminal guys. I'm not talking the truckers. I'm talking of the truck terminal guys. Please allow the multimodality to be done on PPP. That's it. Now, if when a train comes, let the train handling is best done by the railways, but the interface is best done by business. Now, all what is required in this country as a policy for implementation is let the interface, the physical interface management from one mode to another, which is where the whole logistics cost balloons and disproportionately, you make it competitive by allowing a PPP arrangement, because when you talk of railways, the hinterland for development will always be with the hinterland will always be with the concerned operator. For example, the railways will loan land nearby, and that is meant for the trade, which is what I would call the model shift. Those areas needs to be managed by the businesses, because they will know where the modalities and the efficiency to connect. I'll give you a very small example for Krishnan to do it. Krishnan, we have not been able to build the Madurai bridge for 15 years yet. I mean, the cost is just 34 crores. A 34 crore investment on the Madurai bridge will increase the throughput to Chennai port 2 times. And the congestion will be reduced. Virtually, there will be no congestion. It will be a seamless interface. And that's where, and the whole thing is happening because we are not able to decide who is going to build the infrastructure.
I think he has again got some connectivity problem.
Okay.
We'll come back to him when he's back. We are running short of time. I just want to wind up with one last question to all the panelists, please. Yeah, Mr. Krishnan, you want to add something? You have raised your hand.
You asked your question, so when I respond to it, I'll come back on the point that Mr. Shiv said.
Okay. So, one quick question to all panelists. One single positive aspect of our industry, which has brought us where we are today, and one single negative aspect that or a shortcoming that needs a relook and addressing. Quickly, to across all participants, starting with you, Mr. Krishnan, please.
I think on the general question that you made about one shortcoming we need to reduce really is the issue of coordination and the issue of banging heads together. I think we need to think of these issues, conceptualize these issues together as agents who are trying to increase overall welfare as opposed to trying to compete in terms of does it help one individual sector more or does it help one kind of agency or one government department or one government entity more. So I think that is something which we need to honestly collaborate and not compete and not sort of look to see what are the points that we can score off. So that is clearly the message that I would like to take away, because this is fundamentally a game of collaboration and coordination, and that's the way you achieve business. And that brings me straight into answering, or rather responding to what Mr. Shivasagan said about the Madurai elevated roadway. Now, you know, the thing is that he knows the story as well as anybody in Chennai knows. There was a political standoff in 2011, so the bridge got stalled. The grounds which were given were, in today's words, an environmental ground, that it affects a water body, the Kuam River, and it reduces its carrying capacity, and straight away you know how sensitive that is. So that became a big issue till we were able to resolve it in 2017. The dates are crucial. 2017, I think he will understand the significance of that date. And once we were able to bring them back on board, the design became the problem, and who meets the additional cost. Now, the state government has been prepared to meet the additional cost, and we have told the National Highways Authority that. But then there's a question of design, and we felt that if you are building a roadway through the city, then build it in such a way that it also serves the traffic of the city in addition to serving the movement of vehicles to the port, which is of course significant. So I think the whole thing is being redesigned, and we are waiting for the final report from the NHAI, and the state government is of course assured all support. This I'm aware of from the new developments, and it should come up. I mean, it should come up at a significantly higher cost than was originally planned, but hopefully with significantly more convenience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'll have to leave. So
can you take because can you, sir, just give out 2 bits?
Yeah. So the question that you asked, I think that it was referred to the industry, meaning the logistics industry, right? So what is it that we have done well, and what is it that we need to do better, right? Okay, so, well, I think that what we have done well in the past few years, if you say, is that we have built infrastructure. Especially if you see the road sector, the infrastructure building has been pretty very dominant, and it seems that we can see that change. In railways, we are trying to do catch up. Infrastructure is best. It is if it is made ahead of the demand, it creates its own demand. So that is I would say that, yeah, these are some of the better aspects. I think where we need to really work hard is what is the theme of your conference, which is seamlessness. That's where the real challenges are: multimodalism, seamlessness. That's where I think the software the hardware, both, they have to be improved. I would say that that's where the real challenge is. Internally within each sector, I think each sector has really infrastructure-wise done well. Railways, we need to do much more in terms of what is required of the economy. But I think that would be my short answer. But I'll also try to take your permission to leave because the other meeting is starting.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, for participation at short notice. We will be in touch with you, and thanks for your support of our concept of seamless multimodalism.
Yeah.
Wherever you are located, our local team will meet you in person and we will pursue the issue. Thanks.
Right.
Again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I just have, we have very little, I'll finish, I'll end with Mr. Sivasaram. So before that, Vivek, can you please answer this question as well?
Yeah, so basically, I'm a big proponent of digitalization, and as already pointed out by Mr. Singh, in terms of hardware and software. So I think when it meets hardware and software, hardware traditionally would, in railway parlance, would be the rolling stock and stuff like that. And software would be in terms of the policies and also in terms of the platforms, the electronic platforms. So, I would, so I think there's an opportunity that we can do better. There have been certain initiatives by the government, but I think we are still working in, Mr. Shivasalam would know, and we had a number of discussions on that. We've been working in huge silos when it comes to different modes of transport. We don't have common exchange, message exchange protocols between the different modes of transportation. We have different systems, that are working independently. The integration is a long way ago. So I think although we have a national logistics policy, but I think what we require is a strong statutory, or a legal authority which will which will give a hard push to the integration agenda. Because if you have to bring everybody, to the table, then it is only to a certain extent the regulatory push or a strong authority will help us in achieving this. That would be my
thank you. Thank you. Abhishek, would you like to take this question quickly? Thanks.
The biggest challenge for our industry in terms of the trucking in the logistics piece, I think, is the adoption of the technology that we're all talking about. And there's a lot being done in that space, with the e-way bill coming in, with various fast tags and other things coming. So hopefully we shall be able to overcome that in times to come. Okay. Thank you, Success.
Thank you. Mr. Sivasaram, I'll end with you. The question, which unfortunately we are running short of time, so we could not take in your view on the previous aspects, and you got interrupted with a bad connection. But my last question was just quickly, in a few lines, one single positive aspect of our industry which has brought us to where we are today, and one single aspect where the shortcoming is there which needs quick redressal. So could you please, sir?
I'll put it this way. The biggest success is, the industry is highly optimistic. It's a bunch of optimists joined together. They are always positive. They are always forward-looking. The negative aspect of it is things are not quick enough. And in that, everybody may be a loser at the end of it. And that's what, because these are all opportunities which are there for the time being. These will get swallowed up over a period of time. And then the gains will not be there for the thing. The optimism will become what I would call a matter of missed deadlines and missed opportunities. Just coming back to the one thing which I would like to say, I entirely agree with what we said. Well, when Vivek mentioned about regulation, and all what I want to say is, you just get when you talk about regulation, it can mean a whole lot of things, from a minor rule to a navigation aid or things like that will all be governed by regulation. I would like to put it like this: get in place the multimodal law first, because you need to get the big boys to comply. The big boys will comply only when there is a multimodal law. Otherwise, as was rightly said, railways will say, I have developed a system. my voice system is the best the whole world has ever seen. The shipping guy will say the same thing, that my bill of lading is the best thing which the world will ever see. And so is the case with the road receipt. Now, unless and until once you get a multimodal law in, it binds everybody else, and getting the big boys to comply is the first requisite, and that can be done by the multimodal law. The draft multimodal law, which we didn't say so, but it achieved it, because we didn't want to make it too threatening. But it did achieve it without saying so. And maybe if we really care for good and cheap and seamless logistics, the first step in the legal arena is to bring the multimodal law. I mean, no law will be ever perfect. Tomorrow, by its working, if we find that we need to have an amendment, we will get it done. After all, even our constitution gets amended every year. So why we are talking about multimodal law, but trying to get the best law and then implement it is like ensuring that the thing will never happen. And that's where I would say the industry may concentrate, because we have the most favorable environment today. Manoj gave an indication of that yes, seamlessness is an issue which we need to tackle, and its time has come. And therefore, the time for the multimodal law has also come. Because when the big boys start talking about it, that's the time when we need to get things done. And that's all what I want to say.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And with this, I would like to end the formal session. For the I don't know, Mr. Convener, do we have time for some questions? Because we had just finished 2 minutes before schedule at 3:08. I don't know, Padma, and you have to take.
Padma, how much time do we have?
Yeah, we can take a couple of questions.
So,
Okay.
So
I think before that, let me welcome Dr. Malini Shankar, who was on screen. Thanks, Dr. Malini Shankar. And if you may like to have a couple of words, you are free. Otherwise, no, we can. But thanks for your presence as support. And we can take questions now.
Okay, so thank you, Shantanu. The first question, and I leave it to the panelists to raise their hands who would like to answer the question. The first one is from Mr. Raymond Shroff. Can the 14% share of logistics costs be drilled down component-wise and quantum-wise to focus on which aspect of logistics contributes the maximum and to scale it down to a consolidated 8%? Go for it, Mr. Sivasara, please.
See, first of all, let me correct a misnomer. The cost which has been indicated is about 13% of the GDP. It's not about 13% of the price or any such thing. It's a GDP. And I have on several occasions in the past given an explanation for this as well. When you talk about 13% of being as the logistics cost for India, somebody who has actually gone through the report will say China spent 17% of the GDP as logistics cost. So what's the problem? That's not the way one looks at it. The point is, depending upon the nature of geography which we have, as compared to that of China, we need to compare ourselves to the European economies, which spend 9% or 8 to 9% of the GDP as part of the logistics cost, which means what? 91% of the business or the goods and services are moved by just 9%. Whereas in India, 87% of the goods and services are moved with 13%. So they are able to move more goods and services with less, and we are able to do less with more. And that's the way to look at it. Drilling down has been done. For example, in respect of something like steel, it's available. It's a published data with the Ministry of Logistics. We have done that for about, I think Anant was involved in this. We had done that for about 13 commodities. It's available for steel, it's available for coal, it's available for a whole lot of bulk related materials. A ballpark, I can tell you, it's for steel, it's about 27% of the total cost, which is done, which logistics consumes. And a lot of it obviously has to do with freight, because of our freight policy that steel guys and the coal guys cannot move away from the railways. So you always put them in the highest bracket. So that's the way it is. And these are all matters of policy which this country needs to debate. And that also explains why our steel exports don't take place, because we spend a lot within our own country. Drilling down has been done. It has been done for food grains as well, which by far is efficient, because there is also a huge political interest in keeping costs down. So they are actually subsidized much below their so actually their logistics cost should be much higher than what they are today. And similarly for coal and steel, it needs to be far lower than what they are. Drilling down has been done. The information is publicly available. It's available with the ministry, with the Department of Logistics. I think the contact point should be Anand Swarup, who has the details. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So one last question we have from Mr. B.N. Chatterjee. As per the CHE report, there is a huge loss in Food Corporation of India due to transit loss and pilferage. So why is the NLP not focusing on cargo movement through domestic containers? Good question. Who would like to take that, please? Mr. Sivasalam, have you raised your hand for that as well?
No. I'm not. Previous one, I should need to delete that.
I think, Abhishek, you are the best person to answer that question. So
but I see there was a policy and movement for moving food grains in containers, including half containers. So I think we have to action it. And the challenge, as we understood then, was there is no return movement for containers. In fact, there was a discussion about using the containers for storage also. So bit of work has to be done, but we won't say that anything is done until it is complete. So there has been a study, and there has to be a demand from the users equally. Users also need to participate and pursue. We don't see it happening, though this is not our particular, like it's not international. But I know what was happening in that area. I think not just food grains, it included fertilizer, it included pesticides, it included other agro products, means the machinery and equipment, store it in container and then keep it, bring it back or for distribution, including half container. So there is some focus.
But what you said is valid for the entire container business. Itself, irrespective of the nature of the community, of the commodity. The problem in India is that there is no container-based public market. And which is what I'm trying to tell you, that the platform needs to create. The e-platform will create a market for containers, because where a container is located, I don't know. So there is no market, and nobody is able to, everybody says, I want it. But there is no way by which it can be created in a cost-effective manner, except through the digital platform system. And that was my pitch when I had suggested, when we were discussing about it some time ago. That's all.
Okay. So I think, thank you. Abhishek, do you want to add anything to this, since it was directed at you?
I can just add that there is a lot of activity that's going on in this space. Maybe not for containers, but for silo trains, where grains could be loaded directly from the silos. It's still in the infant stage, but I'm sure that will definitely scale up, because plants are being put up to manufacture these kind of wagons.
Okay. So thank you. I think we end the session here. Just before I end, there is a request from Captain Ajay Achutan that to requesting all to attend the session on logotherapy tomorrow, as I can hear concerns on human beings creating barriers. So, I mean, please do join it. It will be an interesting session. With this, I conclude the session. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for patiently bearing with us. Mr. Bhatkamkar, over to you, sir.
I think my sum up will be very big, so I will not include what everyone has said. I would say every one of us agreed that it has to be seamless multimodal, focus on digitization and the sense of urgency which Mr. Sivasailam brought about, and the multi-segmental integration and coordination are the key themes. Mr. Krishna, you wanted to say something? No, okay. So I would put my sum up on record with Informa for publication and circulation. I am sure you are recording the meeting. Please make the best use of this meeting and come out with a paper. I can assure you it was a very content-intensive participation with no side talk, very focused and content intensive. So please come out. We will assist you from Amtoy in coming out with paper, and I will take help of Mr. Sivasailam because his help I can take for granted. So with this, I think we can also share our paper with INU for further study. So please make best of this session. With this, thanks everyone for participation, and we close the session on time. Back to you, Parma.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Shantanu. Thank you very much, panelists, for a great insights on this most relevant and important topic, which impacts several industries and the economy. Thank you to Mr. Krishnan, Mr. Sivashailam, Mr. Manoj Singh, Mr. Vivek Kele, Abhishek Gupta, Serexis Master, and Mr. Bhatkamkar.